Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. And I just want to ask the question before we get started. Do you believe that America was founded on a Christian moral framework? Because if we were, that begs the question of how did we move away from that framework in the day and age that we have today? And when did that take place? Who was responsible for it? And was it a natural evolution of our society or was it unnatural? And so that is what my research is looking at. I'm trying to look at, did we have a Christian moral framework? Like, were we founded as a Christian nation, or were we not? And if we were not, essentially my research is meaningless because to understand an undoing of a foundation that we didn't have would be to try to understand something that never happened. So that is why works like Mark David Hall's "Did America Have a Christian Founding" is so influential. 2019, it's a fantastic book. I have like two copies of it, and in that he establishes that far beyond what they are given credit for today, that the founders were overwhelmingly Christian. That Christianity was espoused in all of their works. That in almost all of their writings, you can see their faith. And so, because of that, there's a foundation that they established that almost everything from there is built upon. Now, the only problem with Mark David Hall's work is that he's very focused on the early American history, whereas I expand into the mid 20th century. And so I'm wanting to look at how did that change? How did the foundation that we were inherited, how was it changed during that time period? When we get to the 1960s and the Cultural Revolution, obviously it's major changes, and so who was responsible for those changes? And so trying to look at that, a influential 90s historian wrote a piece called "The Soul of the American University" in 1994, George Marston. Fantastic writing, but he essentially argues that there was a major break within the university system where they essentially transformed these institutions that were overwhelmingly Christian Protestant universities to becoming secular. And he argued that they did that on the basis of professionalism and this idea of neutrality and pragmatic realism. This idea that you're going to move to a society where you have professionals in each field, and those professionals are going to be experts so that they can take care of those issues to promote democracy. So he does an excellent job at explaining that. The only problem with his work, Marston's, is that he doesn't expand upon it. He doesn't expand past that, which is fine because it's a very focused work, but specifically for the 1990s. I mean, it's basically unheard of work at that point. But I look to expand past that to see how did it influence the courts and our society at large. So, talking about the courts specifically, though, you have to look at another person from 2019, besides Mark David Hall, which was Stephen Green in his work, the Third Disestablishment. Now, the Third Disestablishment is looking at the court system and how did the court transform its vocabulary that it was using to more neutrality and the idea that we're in a post-Christian society, that essentially Christianity has no place in government, the wall of separation between church and state. How did they get to the place to where they're using that language? Now, he does a fantastic job, but there's a couple things that he misses. He doesn't look at where their intellectual ideas came from, and he also doesn't look at what occurred because of those ideas that they expressed within those courts. He just looked at the vocabulary and the change that they were using. He looked at the details of the change, not necessarily what caused the change. And so that's where my work is looking to try to fill that gap of what caused that change within the courts. And so when you're looking to try to understand what caused that change, you need to look at a broader understanding of Western civilization and where we're at today. And so Charles Taylor in 2007 did a fantastic job of putting out a piece called "A Secular Age." The only problem is that this is a wide sweeping study of the entire history essentially of Western civilization. And so he looks at how did we go from religion being the default to it being an option amongst many. How did we get to this essentially consumer religion that we have today where it's essentially a label instead of being the default that everyone understands. And so that's what he looks at. And he does a fantastic job of looking at that. And it is important for the foundation, similar to Mark David Hall's work, Did America Have a Christian Founding? But it's not focused on the time period that I'm looking at, and it's also not focused on the specifics of the people who are responsible maybe for that change. He adopts a lot of the ideas of modernity kind of gradually replacing religion, which, like I said, I don't believe in that. I don't believe that the Christian moral framework was just naturally replaced. It looks very forced when you actually try to dig into what caused it, which leads us to talking about the forcing of those ideologies. David Hollinger's work, After Cloven Tongues of Fire from 2013. And in his work, he explains that there was essentially a coalition between the secular intellectuals and liberal Protestants to create this education system that we have, which is essentially this godless, professionalized society. And he does a fantastic job of explaining that. Now, he puts some blame in some areas that I might not necessarily agree with, but his work is influential in understanding that maybe it wasn't just a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't just a natural progression of modernity. Maybe it was purposeful. And so that's the question that I'm asking. And I hope you all join me on this journey and hope to look forward to possibly working with you more in the future. Thank you.